Rain whispered against the windshield as Lena drove deeper into the pine-veiled mountains, the world narrowing to the two pale beams of her headlights. Recently divorced and desperate for silence, she thought solitude would cleanse her of the city's noise and her ex-husband's ghost. The road curled like a sleeping serpent through fog, and her phone's signal faded to nothing. She smiled, almost relieved. Miles behind her, another car slowed its pace, keeping just far enough to disappear when she checked the mirror. Lena didn't notice. The cabin she'd rented online, cabin at Alder Ridge, promised a secluded retreat with no neighbors in sight. But I knew exactly where she was going. After all, I'd chosen that cabin for her weeks ago, before she even started looking. The cabin smelled of cedar and rain-soaked moss, its silence so thick it pressed against Lena's ears. She unpacked slowly, placing her camera by the window, her journal on the table, as if ritual might bring peace. The storm had strengthened. A low growl of thunder rolled over the ridge, and lightning flickered like flashbulbs in the distance. She turned on a single lamp, its amber glow soft against the wooden walls. Somewhere beyond the porch, branches cracked. Just wind, she told herself. Still, she locked the door twice. She never saw the small red light blinking from across the clearing, the lens of a camera hidden in the hollow of a pine. Lena's journal entries began soft. Day 1. It's raining. I think that's good. Her handwriting slanted, words trembling slightly from cold or memory. She wrote of the silence, of hearing her breath echo in the cabin's hollow spaces. But then she stopped mid-sentence when she noticed something. Her reflection in the window wasn't quite right. Behind her, in the glass, a darker shadow lingered, standing where no one stood. She turned sharply, nothing but her coat on a chair. Still, she drew the curtains and whispered, "It's fine," though her pulse betrayed her calm. The rain subsided near midnight. She stood on the porch, coffee steaming in her hands, and breathed in the smell of wet pine. The forest hummed softly. Nocturnal life, awakening under dripping leaves. Somewhere down the trail a crunch echoed. She squinted but saw only fog shifting between trunks. Then, faintly, music. A woman's humming, tuneless but tender, coming from the woods. Lena froze, the sound drawing closer before stopping abruptly, as if realizing it was being heard. She whispered, "Hello?" The silence that followed felt like it was waiting. By morning, the forest glistened under a pale, washed-out sun. Lena opened the door to find footprints in the mud, too large to be hers, too deep to be from last night's rain. They led from the edge of the woods to her porch steps and stopped there. She followed them with her gaze, heartbeats steady but loud, then retreated inside. She didn't see the figure watching from the tree line. A man in a dark raincoat, face obscured by shadow, hands resting calmly in his pockets. He smiled faintly, as if her fear were a signal had been waiting for. The morning felt wrong. Lena brewed coffee, but the percolator's rhythms sounded off. Slower, uneven, like a heartbeat out of sync. She walked to the window and saw fog hanging lower than before, the forest muffled under its weight. The footprints were still there, but new ones overlapped them, lighter, smaller, leading toward the woods again. She wanted to call someone, anyone, but her phone remained dead, an empty signal bar mocking her. Her mind whispered possibilities she tried to silence. Hikers, hunters, a prank. But deep down, she knew those prints were fresh, and whoever made them had returned to the trees, waiting for her to step outside. She decided to walk the perimeter, telling herself it was just to feel safe again. The forest greeted her with silence. No bird song, no rustle, only the drip of dew from leaves. The air felt heavy, thick with moisture and something unseen. She crouched near the prints, noticing how the edges were sharp, not softened by rain. They circled the cabin, stopping beneath her bedroom window. Her heart skipped. She straightened slowly, realizing whoever had stood there had watched her sleep. The thought crawled over her skin like frost. She turned toward the woods, scanning between trunks, and for the first time thought she saw movement retreating deeper into the trees. Inside, she pulled her journal close, flipping to a blank page but couldn't write. The scratching of her pen felt too loud. Instead, she checked every window latch, every lock. The cabin's stillness pressed down like weight. Then, a thud. Soft, deliberate, from the roof above. She froze mid-step. Another. Then a slow drag, like a boot scraping wood. Her breath hitched. She tiptoed toward the fireplace, hand trembling as she picked up the iron poker. The sound stopped. For a heartbeat, the silence was absolute. And then something slid down the window, a streak of mud, as though a hand had rested there, watching from above. Night fell early, swallowing the ridge in thick gray fog. Lena lit candles, their glow trembling across wooden walls. She whispered to herself, pacing. Every creak felt alive. Then, a sharp knock. Not at the door, but on the side of the cabin. 3 steady taps. She turned off the lamp, her breath shallow. Another knock, closer this time, as if circling. She edged to the window, moving the curtain just enough to glimpse outside. For a moment, only fog. Then a flash, a reflection of her own face in glass, and behind it, the faint outline of a man's jaw in the darkness, motionless. She didn't sleep. Instead, she sat at the table, clutching her flashlight, waiting for dawn. Hours passed. The clock ticked irregularly, mocking time. Then, faintly, she heard it again. Footsteps on the porch, slow, careful. The doorknob twisted once, then again. She swallowed hard, forcing herself not to move. Finally, silence. The sound of retreating steps fading into the wet leaves. She waited a full 10 minutes before standing, body trembling. When she finally opened the door, she found something hanging from the knob. Her own cabin key, wet with rain, as if freshly placed there. When morning finally broke, the fog refused to lift. It felt thicker, heavier, clinging to the glass like breath. Lena sat at the kitchen table, the untouched flashlight beside her, watching condensation form on the window. Her thoughts moved like cold water, slow, reluctant. Whoever was outside had touched the door, replaced the key, and left nothing else. But why leave it? She reached for her camera, scrolling through last night's photos she'd taken out of nervous habit. And then her pulse stopped. A shape, faint but unmistakable, reflected in the window behind her in one shot. A man's outline, standing exactly where she now sat. The realization hit her like ice. He had been inside. She rose slowly, scanning every corner of the cabin, every door frame. The air felt stale, disturbed. The rug was crooked. A chair had shifted half a foot from where she remembered it. She opened the closet. Nothing. The bathroom, empty. Then, the bedroom closet. Her hand hesitated on the knob. The sound of her breath was the only thing alive. She opened it fast. Only coats. Still, she kept staring, feeling something wrong about the space, until her eyes landed on the floorboards. The dust had been brushed aside, revealing faint scuff marks leading beneath the bed. Her trembling hand lifted the edge of the bedspread. The flashlight caught movement. A small object, metallic, glinting in the beam. She reached for it cautiously, pulling out a miniature camera lens. She recognized it instantly, the same brand as her own. Someone had hidden it under her bed, angled toward her sleeping space. Her chest constricted as she realized the truth. She had been filmed. Each night, each moment, recorded without her knowing. The storm outside rumbled like a warning. She dropped the lens and staggered back, her reflection in the dark window flickering. But this time, another reflection lingered beside it. She grabbed her keys and jacket, racing toward the car, her breath visible in the cold air. The forest seemed to close in, every tree a sentinel. But when she reached the SUV, her panic froze into horror. The doors were unlocked. Inside, her glove compartment lay open, contents neatly rearranged. On the passenger seat rested her own photo, taken from last night's camera roll, printed, crisp, her sleeping face framed in darkness. Beneath it, written in thin, deliberate handwriting, "Don't leave yet." She stumbled backward, dropping the photo into the mud, her throat too tight to scream. The forest seemed to hum around her, as though it were listening. Then, a distant sound, footsteps again, but not from the woods this time, from the cabin. She turned toward it, heart pounding, and saw through the fog her own front door swinging open slowly. No wind, no movement. Just the open door creaking faintly, then faint static echoed from inside. The sound of a recording device turning on. Lena's mind raced. She realized she wasn't just being watched. She was being invited back in. Lena stepped back toward the cabin, each footfall sinking into the mud with a reluctant squelch. The air hung heavy with the scent of pine and ozone, the storm crawling closer again. Her flashlight beam trembled across the wooden siding. Inside, the static still crackled, faint but deliberate, a low mechanical whisper beneath the wind. She paused at the threshold, her reflection faint in the open door's glass. Then she crossed it. The moment she did, the door closed behind her on its own. The static grew louder, a rhythmic pulse matching her heartbeat, and then from the corner of the room, a man's voice, quiet, calm, and close. "You came back." She spun toward the voice, the beam catching a man she'd never seen before. Tall, rain-soaked, eyes steady, a small camera dangling from his hand. He didn't flinch as the light hit him. He only smiled faintly. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said, his tone measured, deliberate. "You weren't supposed to see me yet." Lena's throat went dry. "Who are you?" she managed. His smile faded. "Someone who knows what silence does to people," he said, taking a slow step forward. The light glinted off a scar running along his jaw. Pale against the dim, he set the camera on the table between them, its red light blinking like a heartbeat. "You booked this cabin," he said softly, "but I made sure it was available." His words felt rehearsed, almost tender. Lena's grip on the flashlight tightened. "Why?" she whispered. He glanced at the window, then back to her. "Because I needed to see what you'd do when no one was watching," he said. "Except, of course I was." He leaned forward slightly. "You live your life pretending the world doesn't see you." "I wanted to prove it still can." Lena took a slow step backward, realization dawning. This wasn't about her. It was about control. Lightning flashed, white light flooding the cabin for a second, revealing the walls, every one of them peppered with small holes. Not knots in the wood, lenses. Hidden, hundreds of them embedded like eyes. Lena staggered backward, her breath shattering into gasps. "You filmed everything," she hissed. The man nodded once, unblinking. "Every second," he said. "I wanted to see the real you, when you thought you were alone." She swung the flashlight toward him like a weapon. "Delete it," she demanded. His expression softened, almost pitying. "It's not stored here." Thunder cracked. "Then where?" His grin widened. "Everywhere." The storm hit full force. Rain hammered the roof as wind screamed through the chimney. Lena lunged for the table, snatching the small camera, smashing it to the floor. Sparks flared briefly, then died. The man didn't move, just watched, quiet, rainwater dripping from his sleeve. "You can't erase being seen," he murmured. "It's already out there." Her breath came ragged. "Then I'll stop you," she said, voice trembling but sharp. His eyes softened with something close to admiration. "You'll try," he said, stepping back toward the door. "But I'm not the only one watching." As he opened the door, a flash of lightning illuminated the woods, and dozens of red dots blinked back. The door slammed shut behind him, wind howling through its seams. Lena stood motionless, heart drumming against her ribs. The cabin lights flickered, the storm outside turning the night into a living thing. She pressed her palms to her face, trying to steady her breath. The man's words looped in her head. Not the only one watching. She turned toward the walls again. The lenses still glinted faintly, some cracked, others blinking like dying stars. She grabbed a fire poker and began smashing them one by one, shards of glass scattering like frost. But even over the storm she heard it. Faint static returning not from the cabin this time, but from her car. She bolted into the rain, the wind slashing at her face. The car's interior light was flickering. As she approached, she saw the passenger door slightly open. Static hissed from the radio, a white noise punctuated by a low male voice. She leaned in cautiously, trembling. "You're doing well," it said. Distorted, mechanical, almost done, her throat tight. "Where are you?" she screamed into the dark forest. The radio clicked once, and the voice whispered, "Look behind you." She turned, and for a second, the beam of lightning caught the man's figure standing between the trees, watching, utterly still. She ran. Branches tore at her sleeves, mud pulling at her boots as she plunged into the forest. Each step felt like falling through the earth itself. The rain turned to mist, and the fog thickened into a living wall. Behind her, footsteps followed, slow, deliberate, unhurried. He wasn't chasing her. He was guiding her somewhere. Her breath came in gasps. The flashlight beam shook wildly, slicing through trees. Then in the distance she saw a faint glow, a light beneath the ground. A hatch. The same kind used for old storm shelters. She stumbled toward it, her hand sliding over the slick metal handle. It was already unlocked. She opened it. A set of narrow stairs descended into a dimly lit room humming with electricity. She hesitated, then climbed down, flashlight trembling. The smell of old dust and static filled her lungs. Along the walls, monitors, dozens of them. Each screen flickered between feeds. The cabin, her car, the forest trails, even the grocery store she'd stopped at days ago. Every moment of her solitude recorded. At the center of the room sat a single chair, and on its seat, a new camera, lens pointed upward. A note taped to it read, "Sit. The story isn't finished yet." Her trembling hand reached for the note. The air felt charged, the hum of the machines vibrating through the floorboards. She looked up at the screens again and froze. On one of them, a live feed showed her standing in that very room, right now, from an unseen angle. The realization sank in. She was being watched even here. Her flashlight flickered and died, leaving only the glow of the monitors. Then from behind the screens, the man's voice came again. No longer distant, no longer calm. "Now, look at me." The camera on the chair powered on with a soft click, its red light pulsing. She turned toward it, slowly, knowing the feed had already gone live. The sound of her own breath filled the room, ragged, uneven. The hum of the monitors grew louder, like an audience inhaling. Lena's reflection multiplied across screens, infinite versions of her staring back. She turned in a slow circle, searching for the source of the voice, but only her image looked back. Then faintly, from the far wall, she noticed movement. A door camouflaged among the monitors, slightly ajar, a dim light pulsing behind it. The red recording light on the central camera blinked faster, matching her pulse. She stepped toward the door, barefoot on cold concrete, her reflection following on every screen, until one by one, they began shutting off. The narrow corridor beyond the door felt like a throat, swallowing light. Exposed wires lined the walls, dripping condensation. She moved carefully, one hand tracing the wall, the other gripping the dead flashlight. The sound of rain above grew distant, muted thunder echoing through earth. Then ahead a sound, metal scraping concrete. She froze. A faint beam of light slid across the floor. A flashlight, not hers, swaying with someone's movement. "You shouldn't have gone down here," the man's voice said, closer now, almost casual. Her stomach twisted as she realized there was no other exit. She ducked into a side alcove, pressing her back to the wall. Footsteps echoed. Slow, deliberate. The man's shadow stretched past her hiding spot. His voice calm, conversational. "I watched you because you reminded me of her." Lena clenched her fists, heart pounding. "You don't know me?" she whispered. He paused, turning his head slightly as if he'd heard. "I know enough," he replied. The beam of light passed her face, missing her by inches. As soon as it turned away, she moved, sprinting toward the faint glimmer at the end of the tunnel. Daylight, pale and trembling. The tunnel ended in a rusted ladder leading up to a circular grate. She climbed fast, every muscle trembling with adrenaline. Behind her, footsteps quickened. "Don't make this harder," he called, his voice breaking into static as it echoed. She pushed at the grate. It didn't budge. Rainwater dripped through onto her hands. She shoved again, harder, teeth gritted, until it gave way with a screech. The cold air hit her face like salvation. She pulled herself up into the storm, collapsing onto wet earth as lightning fractured the sky. Below, she heard him shouting, not in anger, but in awe. "You found it," he said, voice fading into the rain. The forest had changed. Every tree seemed unfamiliar, every sound amplified. She staggered through the mud, looking back once, the hatch now swallowed by mist. She reached her car, breathless, fumbling for the keys. The ignition stuttered, then roared to life. She drove blindly through the downpour, eyes wide, hands shaking. When she finally reached the main road, she glanced at the rearview mirror and froze. Her reflection wasn't alone. From the back seat, a faint red light blinked once, then twice. The static returned, faint and alive, and over the hum of the engine, his voice whispered, almost fondly, "You're still being watched." The storm passed by dawn. The world looked washed clean, yet nothing felt pure. Lena drove until the road flattened into asphalt, and the trees thinned to pale fields. The sky bruised purple, the rain now a fine mist clinging to her windshield. She hadn't spoken in hours. Her voice, like her faith in safety, gone quiet. She stopped at a gas station, the first sign of life in miles. Inside, fluorescent light buzzed, humming over rows of old snacks and newspapers. The clerk greeted her with a nod. She managed a weak smile. When she reached for her wallet, something else fell from her jacket pocket. A small memory card, slick with moisture. She hadn't put it there. She stepped outside, the mist thick again around the empty parking lot. The gas pump clicked off, and somewhere distant, thunder rolled, faint, unwilling to leave. She held the memory card under the gray light, its surface scratched, but the label legible. Session 6, complete. Her heart stuttered. She looked around, scanning the lot, the tree line beyond. No one. Still, that crawling awareness returned, the sensation of eyes. She pocketed the card, forcing herself to breathe. She had to know what was on it, even if part of her already did. A cheap motel stood a few miles down the road, neon flickering against the pale dawn. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, laptop open, rainwater dripping from her sleeves onto the carpet. She hesitated, then inserted the card. The screen filled with static, then cleared. It wasn't footage of her, not at first. It showed the man, sitting in that underground room, camera trained on him. He spoke softly, as if narrating. "They always come here to be alone," he said, "and they always think they chose it." His eyes lifted, meeting the lens. But they never notice. Someone's already watching them choose. She scrubbed through the footage, fast, desperate, until she saw herself again. Every moment of the past days replayed from impossible angles. Inside the cabin, through the forest, down in the tunnel. But the final clip made her blood turn cold. The timestamp was today, 1 hour ago. It showed her sleeping in the motel bed, the same room she sat in now. Her breath caught. She turned slowly toward the dresser mirror. The small camera light blinked once, red, alive. She backed away from the mirror, pulse racing, breath jagged. The laptop feed flickered again, the man's voice returning, soft, almost soothing. "You see, you were never really alone. None of us are." She slammed the laptop shut, yanked the camera cord from the wall, and stumbled outside into the early light. The sun had broken through at last, the storm gone. Birds sang faintly. But as she reached her car, something new caught her eye. A small sticker on the windshield, perfectly centered. White text on black. Session 7. Recording in progress. Her reflection stared back in the glass, eyes wide, realizing the feed had never stopped.